Hi, this is Andre from S&S Diesel Motorsport. I was just going to talk about our new update for January of 2023. This time we're starting over with version 0, Rev C, that's 1.02. Going forward, our version numbers for M141 and M142 are going to be the same, whereas previously they were always a different revision number followed by a different name. So now the conventions should all be the same, and the only differentiating factor will be an M141 or M142 callout. For this new update, you are going to have to pull a new license. To do that, you're going to have to get a hold of me with your serial number, and I will send you a new file with the license in it. This is what it's going to look like in the file. And the only thing you have to do to put the new license in is double click, and it'll ask you if you want to install archive. You're going to say yes, install succeeded, close. And now the next time that you update the ECU with M1 Tune from this computer, it will put that license on the ECU and there should be a seamless update. So with that out of the way, the next thing, like I said, firmware versions are now going to match going forward. And then Liberty control for like a 5-speed Liberty transmission with the air solenoids on it is the next biggest update. I'm going to save that one for the end because it'll be a little longer explanation once I get to that. So transmission logging rate from 10 hertz to 50 hertz. So previously you might have seen if you were trying to set up your logger, the fastest it would let you put the pressures in was 10 hertz. Now to let you do up to 50 hertz, so 50 samples a second. Suspension travel reset switch. When this driver switch is activated, it sets position to 0. So position is always 0 when leaving the starting line. So this way, when you're looking at your suspension travel in the I2, it will always start from 0. So that way you can see your amount of suspension travel from the time that you've left the starting line. Basically, all it does is resets an offset. So if we go to suspension, position, front, left, sensor, offset. When you activate the driver switch for this, it just resets this offset to the current reading to get it down to 0. So if you want to see what it's doing while you're at the start line, like if it's rolling or rocking back and forth, you can always look at the raw voltage to see the change, and you can also look at the offset to see what the offset's doing while it's at the start line. The driver switch for this is under driver, suspension travel 0 switch. So driver switch 6 is what's assigned to that index right now. Driver switch 6 is the trans brake button. So whenever you're on the trans brake button, the suspension travel will be reset to 0. Next on our update list is transmission soft lock table added. So this looks just like a normal auxiliary table or a nitrous table like you're familiar with. Transmission soft lockup. This is becoming more popular in a lot of the Turbo 400 transmissions from M&M or Rossler. It's just another auxiliary output that you can use, so that way it comes through nice on the logger as soft lock. You don't have to keep notes to remember what's what. Go back. Let's see. We've got enable, disable drop down added to all functions, like aux tables or nitrous. So historically, people have always wanted to like disable nitrous kits for a pass. And the only way to do that would be to enable test mode to disable the kit, which was always kind of counterintuitive. Or you would have to zero out the entire table. But to avoid having to do stuff like that, we've added an enable disable dropdown. So when it's enabled, that kit will operate like normal. And when it's disabled, you don't have to change anything else here. It's just disabled. So you will want to come through here after you do the update to make sure that all of these are enabled that you want them to be. This function is also in all of the auxiliary outputs. So auxiliary output 1, they will, and two or output 1 through 8 will all have this enable disable. So if you want your things to function, you're going to have to come in here and turn them back to enabled after the update. Transmission, uh, some of the transmission stuff will have that. So transmission, the soft lockup, transmission shift, I believe will have that enable disable, and then also the water injection features. So be sure to watch this stuff. Make sure you get them enabled. That might be why your stuff's not working after the update. So next on our update list, ambient density altitude measurement added, and then ambient water grains added. So we started trying to use just kind of testing a sensor, a new weather sensor from Plimpton Innovations. And with that, we've just added a simple ambient density, altitude, and water grains reading. So that way, if you've got a place to assign it, it'll come through nice in the log. You don't have to use an auxiliary input or anything like that. Next on the list, we added a Davis group. So this is for the VPS. So that way we can more easily get it set up to log acceleration for one. But also, what's cool about this is after you get your base ID set up, they just need a mattress in the ECU. You don't have to do any offset or other kinds of assigning or resource assignments. It'll just automatically populate as long as the base IDs match in both. When the VPS is set up correctly with a transbrake input, it'll give you a virtual time slip. So now this virtual time slip stuff will auto populate after you complete a run. It will spit out a new ET and mile per hour. Then, so if you put these in the logger at a slow rate, like 1 hertz is all you need to do because it holds the value. They should be able to get that information in the logger. It will record pitch, so like wheelie angle, and then acceleration, longitudinal, vertical, and lateral. These values come in here on the Davis acceleration, but it also feeds back through to the normal vehicle acceleration. So you'll see that even if these are unassigned, you'll still have numbers by them. So that way, functions in the ECU that might refer to these will still work. Then selectable 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's just a feature that VPS offers that you can have it output additional information on selectable channels. We do need to use output 2 and 3 are always set up for lateral and vertical acceleration. So know that if you do assign these to something else, um, that your lateral and vertical up here will be skewed or not correct. They will match whatever you put on 2 and 3. But 1 and 4 are open and fair game to use for whatever options the VPS has to output. And it'll just be a generic, effectively, it'll come through like a voltage, basically just the raw CAN data that you can then alter in I2. So now the last thing we said I'll talk about is the Liberty group. So did a lot of Liberty transmission refinements in the last couple days to try to get that software straightened out. So for one, I'll go over the driver switches. So driver, scroll down to the Liberty section. So these right here. We got a Liberty forced first gear switch. This is going to be something that you'll set up for the trans brake button. So that way, anytime you're on the trans brake, it will automatically be forced into first gear no matter what. So that way, you pull up to the line, maybe you accidentally bump your upshift button one too many times, or you don't want to even think about pressing the upshift button. You just tap your trans brake button. It'll always go into first gear for you. Force neutral switch. This is if you want to have a safety, basically, that you can push this button, it'll go into neutral at any point in time. Liberty burnout switch. So this will become active when you're doing your burnout, and it needs to be off when you are doing your scheduled pass. Liberty upshift switch, that's pretty self-explanatory. You push this button, it'll shift up a gear. Downshift, you push that button, it'll shift down a gear. One thing to note with the upshift button is that it will wrap around to from fifth gear to neutral. So if you upshift, and then go to fifth gear, push it one more time, the next gear will be neutral. I wasn't sure if this feature would be used or wanted, so if you start to use it and you notice it always going up into neutral, we can remove that feature or possibly make it selectable. Liberty schedule switch, this is what's going to activate the scheduling for the run. So this will be connected to your race mode switch, so that way when it's in race mode, this will be on. And then also when you're in race mode, that will turn the Liberty burnout off. So now if we go down to our Liberty function, you see that there's just a general enable. I don't know if I want to clear that. Basically, you open up the Liberty group. It'll ask you if you want to enable. Say yes. If you click on the Liberty group as well, here is all of the help. I've got that in a Word document as well. If you need that or want that, it just kind of explains all of the different features and functions. Um, so to start off with, we'll just talk about the burnout area. So you've got a throttle pedal activate and delay, and then a deactivate throttle pedal and delay. So the most important one is the deactivate. Uh, After you cross the threshold for activate and it's activated, so you probably want this to happen immediately. Only after it crosses back down through the deactivate, it'll shift back into neutral. So this is critical in the Liberty transmissions so you don't damage them um, from rolling forwards with no load from the engine. You want them to be shifting back into neutral as quick as possible. But this deactivate throttle pedal and then the delay is there so that way if you want to be able to chop the pedal in the burnout or do any kind of pedaling features, you can put a slight delay in there. But just know that this delay is active all the time. So anytime you let off the throttle, this is how long it will wait before it shifts into neutral. So now that you've done your burnout, you will shift or go into race mode, and now the schedule is going to be the active control mechanism. You've got the same activate and deactivate on the throttle pedal. So you're going to want to play with your deactivate delay settings and your throttle pedal setting to account for how you want it to react if you pedal the car mid pass. If you want it to reset to neutral immediately, you'd set this to 0 and maybe drop your throttle percentage to 0%. If you want there to be a slight delay, so that way you can pedal it, get back in it, and it'll still be in the same gear that you were before. That's just something that you need to tune that value. And so now we'll talk about the actual schedule where you're going to be putting your shift points. So this first gear shift this is the gear the RPM that it will shift out of that gear into the next gear. And then schedule time is how long or the minimum amount of time it can remain in that gear. So like if it sees 5500 RPM and you've only been in first gear for 0.2 seconds, it will wait until 0.3 seconds to shift to second gear. When using schedule time, you also have to have an engine speed drop below the next gear point. So if you see 5500 RPM and you've elapsed this 0.3 seconds, it will shift into the next gear, but it will not shift into third gear until you have dropped below 5500 RPMs. So this is just some additional safety to try to keep gears from stacking up on you. But I was a little bit concerned if people have a converter that is too loose and does not allow for that to happen, for the engine speed drop to happen, you're going to want to zero out your Liberty schedule time table and then enter your delay values into Liberty Gear. So now it will be shifting purely off of this time if you're over this RPM. If you do still get engine speed drops, it'll operate like normal. It won't shift until it gets to this RPM as long as shift time has elapsed. So in the help section, it explains the difference between these two. So shift time, use this if the torque converter is not tight enough to produce a defined engine speed drop after a gear shift. And then Liberty schedule time, use this if torque converter is tight enough to produce a defined engine speed drop after a gear shift. That's the main difference between these two. The schedule time just offers you a little bit more safety to make sure that gears don't stack if you don't want them to. And this, like I said, this activate deactivate works just like the burnout activate deactivate. When you drop below 20%, 4.3 seconds in this situation, it will shift that transmission back into neutral so you can coast down. And then after this is done, you can still use the manual upshift or downshift buttons to be able to manually shift it to get off the track or to move around as you might need to. I believe that wraps it up for our firmware update for January of 2023. If you've got any questions, let me know. Thanks.